Hi there, my name is Kendrick, and in this video, I'm going to share with you my experience traveling to my country number 100 to visit every single country in the world, and that country is Iran. My adventure to Iran actually started while I was in Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam, and I reached out to a company called Tap Persia and inquired how to get the visa and how much it would cost. They quoted me 29.96 euros for them to be able to get me approved to get the visa to Iran, and I ended up using my Philippine passport because it would be faster and cheaper than if I were to use my Canadian passport. After 3 business days, I received the letter of approval and I shortly booked my flight going from Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam all the way to Tehran, Iran. My flight to Iran was a rough one. I actually started again in Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam, flying all the way to Seoul, Korea, from Seoul, Korea all the way to Istanbul, and from Istanbul all the way to Tehran, Iran. By the time I arrived in Iran, I was feeling horrible, and I'll go over that more in a bit. Upon landing, I went to look for the counter where I can purchase the visa on arrival, and one of the security staff in the airport, I tried to ask him for help for directions, and he looked at me and he said, "No English here, only Farsi or Turkish." So I thought, oh, okay, must be something to do with the whole US and Iran thing. But anyways, I just ignored it, found the office after doing a little bit of research, and I paid $65 US to get my visa on arrival. I did have to submit my letter of approval that the Tap Persia company provided for me before shortly clearing immigration and going out the gate. Now, I ended up booking a tour with Tap Persia because I heard online that they are one of the best companies to take you around Iran, and I was only going to go there for 4 nights and 5 days, so I thought that was the best decision to do. Upon arrival, my guide wasn't there because the plane actually arrived 30 minutes early, so I asked a local for help to call my guide, and the guide did arrive. His name is Ibrahim, short for Ebi, as he told me to call him. But before he arrived, I was actually bombarded by local Iranians trying to get me to exchange my US dollars to their local currency. Good thing I ignored them because apparently after talking to a few guides here in Iran, they told me that they are gonna scam me, so I'm glad I didn't do that. The first part of my trip is gonna go from the Tehran airport all the way to Isfahan in Iran, and along the way we were gonna stop by a city called Kashan where the Fin Garden is located, which is gonna be my first touristy site that I'm gonna see. On the way there, my guide Ebi also exchanged 50 US dollars and he gave me some Iranian rials in exchange. One thing I didn't prepare for when going to Iran was the weather. I didn't realize it's gonna be so cold in Iran in February of 2024. So by the time we got to Fin Garden, I was freezing to death. Now this place is actually really cool, and I learned a lot about the history of the Fin Garden location as well as the architecture. But I think the biggest lesson I learned was the origin of the German swastika, which actually originated from Iran, and it was nothing bad to begin with. I learned that this symbol, the broken cross, actually was symbol of the 4 elements of wind, earth, water, and fire. Now while checking out Fin Garden, I was shivering to death because it was so cold, and my guide was also shivering. He was actually wearing a mask, and I think he was kind of sick. By the time we reached to Isfahan, I said goodbye to my guide. We did an elbow bump because he was definitely sick at this point, and I was having chills. So I think I really got sick at this point. I did go to the restaurant that he recommended me to go, and hands down, it is the best food I ate while I was in Iran. It was this lamb with eggplant, and oh my god, it was so good. It was also right beside this fire pit, so it was nice and warm. I tried looking for a place to buy a jacket, but I was unable to do that. But I decided that the next day I'm gonna have a full day tour of Isfahan, so I better get some sleep. So I ended up sleeping for 15 hours, and oh my god, the whole night I was delirious. I was having hallucinations, and it was one of the worst nights of my life. But I'm so glad I made that decision because the next day I felt so much better. Although when I did wake up, I had a nosebleed, so the suffering did not end there. My guide was really kind though, and after breakfast I got a chance to meet her. Her name is Mahanas, and she's one of the best guides I've ever met in my life in terms of tourism, and she actually loaned me her jacket to help me keep myself warm because that morning it was -7 degrees Celsius in Isfahan. The first location we visited is the Museum of Islamic Cultural Heritage, and this place was pretty neat because my guide, she showed me this room that had really good acoustics, and it's like a modern day megaphone where whoever stands in the middle can be heard by the entire people inside this place. So it was really cool to see what the ancients did to project their voice even without having electronics or modern technology. Next, we checked out the Chehen Sultan Palace, which is probably the most picturesque place I've ever seen while traveling in Iran. It's just like a really pretty looking place, great for taking pictures and making videos. Since this place was so nice, apparently the ruler used to use this place to entertain their guests who visited Isfahan as a show of power by showing off this beautiful place. However, after checking out this place, I felt something was off, so I asked my guide if we can go back to my hotel room, and I'm glad I did because by the time I arrived, my nose started bleeding again. So definitely Isfahan is a very dry place, and my guide told me that nosebleed is very common among tourists. Now, actually, Before we went back to my hotel room, we also got a chance to check out a place called Kesara, and we had some local tea there, which is located in the bazaar. So after I recovered from my nosebleed, we went back to the bazaar again, and we checked out the International Museum and Cafe Gallery. And this place was really cool because I learned about the foreigners that set up their embassy here a long time ago, such as the Russian people and whatnot. And at the rooftop of this place, we also had an awesome tea while seeing the awesome view of this square. The square's name is Nagesh-e-Jahan, so all the places that I've seen so far was all connected to this huge square. Apparently, if I went during Iranian New Year, which is sometime in late April, this is gonna be full of people and it's hard to get around. After having some tea from the rooftop, Mahanas called Snap, which is the Uber equivalent in Iran, and we went to the Armenian quarter south of the river of Isfahan to a place called Vank Cathedral Tourist Complex. This place is where the Shah at the time invited Armenians to come here to settle because he knew it would benefit Iran greatly with them bringing modern technology as well as commerce. And it did pay off because this city prospered as a result of this. He also allowed the Armenians to build a church there as long as it doesn't look nice outside, but they can make it look nice inside. I think one of the best things I've seen about this place is there was this piece of hair under a microscope with engravings used by a thin diamond. I am amazed by the craftsmanship of being able to engrave on something on a thin piece of hair. This place was also super funny because there was this little girl that went up to me and she said, "Are you Chinese? I can speak Chinese." And I told her, "Yes, I'm Chinese, but I can't speak Chinese." So it was like a really confusing and funny conversation. My guide had to tell them that I'm Chinese, but I'm from the Philippines. I also had a fun time hanging out with my guide Mahanas as we discussed numerous different topics ranging from the tourism being hurt by the protest that happened a while back to LGBTQ in Iran, as well as her sharing her history working as an architect and also doing tour guides outside of Iran to European countries. Upon returning back to my hotel, as the tour ended at that point, I noticed I was feeling a lot better than the day before, and I got a good chance to get some rest before the next day, where we would be doing a road trip from Isfahan all the way to Shiraz and stopping to many different stops along the way. During breakfast the next day, it was so funny because there was a bunch of Iranian men that was betting on what my racial background is. And eventually one of them approached me and said, "Where are you from?" And I told them I'm from the Philippines. And they said, "Oh, you look Chinese." And I said, "I am Chinese, but I'm born in the Philippines." And he reported back to all the Iranian men in the area saying that I am Chinese, just from the Philippines. And they were all like nodding. And it was like the most interesting thing for them. It's kind of like trying to figure out where the tourists came from. So me and Mahana's first stop is to a place called Passagarde. And while driving towards that place, Mahana's also shared some Iranian rap music to me because I told her I like rap music, which is super cool. And I also played some of my own playlists. And I think it's really cool when you do this kind of stuff where you're like exchanging, music from each other's culture, food and whatnot. So I think it's just a really nice experience. Eventually we did reach Passagarde, which is where the tomb of Cyrus is located. And the story about this place is really cool, how potentially his body was placed on the lid of the tomb to prevent tomb robbing. However, his body is missing after they did some scans. Apparently, Alexander the Great ordered his men to not steal the body, but the Arabs did attack Iran, so potentially either Alexander the Great's men did not return the body to the tomb or it somehow got lost during the invasion of the Arabs. Our next stop is the necropolis, which I think is the coolest part of my entire tour in Iran, which is an archaeological site that looks so similar to the Petra, where you have 4 different tombs of Darius II, Xerxes, and Artaxerxes. So Xerxes is the popular guy from the movie 300, and it was kind of cool to see his tomb because he's so famous because of the movies. Darius is also one of the most famous Persian ruler, so it's cool to see his tomb as well. And of course, Artaxerxes is also famous for being one of the most violent and aggressive ruler in ancient Persia. My next stop was Persepolis after Necropolis, which was not too far from here. And Persepolis is the ancient capital of Persia. It was really cool to check out the different sites in this place, the history, how Darius the Great's section in this place was so much more well built because he really cared about his legacy, while Artaxerxes actually had just used the local materials here, so his section of the capital city did not stand the test of time as well as Darius's section did. After checking out Persepolis, we went down to the hotel and restaurant area, and it's really cool because this restaurant and hotel was built before Persepolis became a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So nowadays it's illegal to build this kind of stuff, but because it was built before that, it's allowed. So I ate some kebabs there, which was really good, and Mahana's friend also came by and I chatted with him and we had some friendly banter about eating healthy and stuff. So that was really funny. And before long, Mahanas took me to my hotel in Shiraz. We said our really warm goodbyes. I really highly recommend her as a tour guide here in Iran. So if you're planning on going to Iran and you need a tour guide, I'll link her contact in the description below so you can reach out to her. My accommodation in Shiraz was also very neat looking. It looks like a place in Iran for sure. And the next day I had this amazingly delicious breakfast. It was so good. There's also some friendly locals that went up to me and told me I need to eat the local Shiraz dish. And the dish is called kalampolo, which is apparently rice with cabbage and some meatballs. So I also met my guide that same day. His name's Moji, and he told me that for lunch he would be taking me to that place. Our first destination for the day is called Nasir Lal Mok Mosque, and it was really funny because when we arrived there was a sign that says no cash, but then my guide Moji said I need to pay by cash. So I pointed out the sign and he was surprised and he was laughing, called out the guy working at a ticketing booth, and he said, oh, the reason why you're not getting more tourists is because of this sign. And he started ripping out the sign, which was so funny. Upon entering, Moji told me that this is the most popular site in Iran because every woman wants to go here and take pictures for Instagram. And I looked inside this mosque and it was full of Chinese and Russian tourists taking all sorts of dramatic looking poses with the fancy lights of this place. I did take some pictures and videos there as well, but just a quick one just for souvenir purposes before leaving this place. Our next destination is the Shiraz Naranjastan Museum, and apparently this belonged to a wealthy Iranian from the 1800s, which is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Apparently the Shiraz University bought this place off their family just to better preserve this place. And this place has tons of different orange looking fruits, as well as different art, as well as local musicians as well. So it was a nice place to check it out. Next, we went to the Karim Khan Zan Citadel, which belonged to the Khan at the time, who is known to be very good at treating his people. And apparently he was close to the people in the sense that he would work side by side with them instead of just hang out in his palace. Apparently after some time, this citadel did get abandoned and then later on turned to a prison, which was a bad idea because apparently a lot of prisoners started ripping out all the gold strips from this place to either sell it on the outside or use it to bribe the guards of this prison for favors down the line. Nowadays it's being restored and it's one of the big tourist sites in Shiraz. Our next destination is the Vakil Mosque, Vakil Bath, and the Vakil Bazaar. And the Vakil Mosque, we only had a quick stop just to take pictures, while the Vakil Bath, we did get a chance to go inside, take a look at this place, and I learned that this bathhouse was not just used for taking a bath, but also used as the ancient place to do dental work, which was really gross. Apparently they just pull out your teeth if it hurts without any anesthetics, which is brutal as hell. This place was also the place to get a massage or to get your dead skin from your feet scrapped off. Afterwards, we went to the Vakil Bazaar where we ate lunch. I had that kalam polo, which was really good, while my guide Moji had various different kinds of kebabs. And then we discussed our mutual hate for cockroaches while we were eating our lunch. Our next stop after this is a place called the Green Shrine, and the Green Shrine was also this place of worship. However, inside it was so much nicer. It looks like it was full of crystals. And it was funny though, before I went inside, I was waiting in the tourist waiting room for Moji because he went to the washroom, and then this dude was kind of just asking me questions about my background, and I told him the same story. I'm from the Philippines, and he used to tell me he used to work at the oil refineries and he used to work alongside Filipinos. There was also a friendly lady there working, and I was telling her how the food in Iran is the best in the Middle East, and she was super happy to hear that, oh, the food here is the best. That's so good to hear. Our last stop for the tour is a place called Hafez Tomb, which is a famous artist, actually a poet in Iran. There was tons of students walking around this place, and the cool thing about this place was apparently a lot of locals go here for inspiration, and they think that by going to this tomb they will also get special energy from Hafez that will boost their creativity at whatever artistic pursuit that they're engaging in. Before long, I went back to my hotel room to get ready to fly out of Iran. Now, I thought everything was gonna go well and I was gonna be able to fly out of Iran without any problem whatsoever. However, I was wrong. My guide took me to the airport around 12 a.m. midnight, and by the time we got there, I soon realized that my flight did not exist. My guide was looking at the screen at my flight. Turns out it wasn't there. We were panicking and we were wondering what's going on. Where is my flight? Why is my flight not here? My guide did eventually talk to a security personnel who did say that the flight was indeed available up until a few days ago when there was a cancellation. The bad thing is I did not get any notification about the cancellation because I booked my flight through the Aeroplan Air Canada portal and I never received any notification, and Air Canada is known for doing this kind of BS. So I am now officially stranded in Iran, which is super scary. My guide came up with this elaborate plan for me to fly to Tehran. He'll give me some cash, I'll be able to buy a flight with Turkish Airlines, and then from there I can fly to Istanbul. However, when he dropped me off back in my hotel while we were brainstorming on what to do next, I was talking to my girlfriend and we came to the conclusion that the best possible solution is actually to fly to Dubai from Iran. At the time, I was in the Shiraz airport, which is only about a 1-hour flight to Dubai, and also the flights were cheaper if I booked with a local Iranian carrier for about $200 US. So I did get a chance to speak with my guide about this plan of action, and he went ahead and booked me a flight with Kashan Airlines, and by pure luck there was only one seat left and I was able to secure that seat flying to Dubai. However, this is when the problem continues to become worse. So I barely got any sleep, went back to the airport again, and when I was going through security, if I want to go to Dubai, I have to show them my Canadian passport because my Philippine passport requires a visa way ahead of time to enter Dubai, while with my Canadian passport, I can enter Dubai without any prior visa arrangement. However, Iran and Canada are not in good terms, so it's kind of like that Argo moment if you've seen that movie with Ben Affleck on how the Canadians helped the Americans escape Iran during the Islamic Revolution. So I was scared because they took away my Canadian passport and my Philippine passport, and it took about 30 minutes for them to sort it out that I was eligible to board this flight going to Dubai and that my Canadian passport would be eligible to enter that country, and there was no problem with me carrying my Canadian passport in Iran. So even though it was a scary moment and it was only brief, it was still scary nonetheless, but I did manage to get through security, and by the time I got into the gate, the Iranian people were really friendly, and also spoke to some locals who helped me use up the remaining of my Iranian reals to buy some chocolates and some treats before finally boarding my flight on Kashan Airlines going from Shiraz in Iran all the way to Dubai in the UAE. By the time I got to the UAE, it was such a liberating feeling because finally they have working internet, which I struggled with when I was in Iran as their internet wasn't working very well as a result of having to use a VPN to access anything outside of Iran. I was able to then book my flight using my Aeroplan points going from Dubai to Bahrain, Bahrain to Singapore, and Singapore finally to Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam, where I am currently staying at as I'm making this video. The flight from Dubai to Bahrain was relatively decent, and because I did use my points to book my flight, I was able to fly on business class going from Bahrain all the way to Singapore, which was great because finally I could get some sleep. Now, it was only a 7-hour flight, so I only got 5 hours of sleep, but it still goes a long way when you've been awake for 24 hours. By the time I got to Singapore, there was one last flight going to Ho Chi Minh. It was a little bit scary because I only had an hour and a half to get another boarding pass again because I did not get a boarding pass issued to me in Dubai when I booked my flight. But luckily, Singapore is an amazing airport. They're very well organized. I was able to get my boarding pass going to Ho Chi Minh. Before long, I boarded and I arrived in Vietnam without any problems. I'm so glad to be back in Vietnam as of making this video because that was quite a close call. Although I'm still glad I did this trip and visited my 100 country, which is Iran, and my accidental 101 country, which is the UAE. Anyways, that's about it for this video. Overall, I enjoyed my trip to Iran. It's an amazing country. I'd like to go back there again one day should they ever lift the sanctions and make it easier for tourists to enter that beautiful place with really friendly people. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.